I wanted to talk a little bit about sort of what our vision is and where we're headed. Look at this picture for a little while. I sat on a plane beside this gentleman for about 5.5 hours. And so what he was doing was using his laptop as the world's most expensive iPod battery. And he had the mouse, right there beside. Do you know why he had the mouse? Anybody want to guess? You got to bump it with your elbow to keep the machine awake so it keeps working as a battery. So he'd go, for like 5.5 hours. And this got me thinking. This got me thinking. This got me thinking about a few things. And well, first of all, there's nothing really actually watching the gameplay and the style of game, which is a fine game, but that seemed particularly compelling to, in fact, even to touch. Right? You could do this as a WASD game or whatever, and it would be fine. It'd be quite good. So that was, so that got me thinking about, well, like, why, what about this experience why could you possibly be doing this as the best way for you to spend your time on a plane? And, frankly, a lot of AppUp and a lot of what we're doing here is entirely based on thought processes that in no small part were informed by this picture. So one observation is that the sort of software ecosystem that's available on the PC today has some distinct areas in it that have been underinvested in. In particular, one of the beauties of acquiring applications on the iPhone is this notion that you have this single store that you can go to, and you can buy applications there, and they're sort of managed automatically. When we looked at that, we thought, OK, so what about that equation is really interesting and valuable, and how would you apply it to the PC? And in particular, how would you apply it to a PC on Windows as well as MeeGo? Back then, we were working on Moblin, but on MeeGo now. Another thing we thought about is, as someone who owns 3 of these, right? Like, why is the battery in this thing so terrible? But the other thing we thought about is this notion of the cable. So I sort of refer to this as the tyranny of the white cable. This incredibly sort of forward-looking modern device has actually still got this noose around its neck of a white tether that dates back about 15 years. And I dread running iTunes because I just want to, again, I love my iPhone. I've got 3 of them. I bought hundreds of apps, but I kind of want to, God bless them, stab my eyes out with a ice pick whenever I have to run it. And the architecture started out there, and that was an interesting lesson for us because we thought, well, what are the architectural decisions that we might be making now that we would later come to regret that somebody might have made as it relates to this? Like, are we making a bed of nails in which to sleep in as it relates to apps? And I'll talk a little bit more about this because it's not all bad, right? So that brought us to, OK, so if I'm a developer and I wrote that game, what do I want? Right? Why did I write it for that phone? Why do I write it for anything? And we sort of keep asking these questions over and over again to keep refining that and figure it out. And what we've come up with is sort of this stack. And you'll notice that these are all, we got pictures of all you guys, right? And we're sort of revalidating, or some of you, we're revalidating these questions as we go to make sure that we're right. And one thing that is clear to us, and we think that the iPhone is actually quite good at this, is this notion of platform sexiness. And we view this as being 2 things. It's the device as well as the tribe, right? That you want both. The other thing we think about is TAM. You want API volume. You want to deploy to the biggest possible number of devices. Bigger is better for a single API. And you combine those 2, and you really sort of come up with, you want a big TAM, you want a cool tribe, and you want a great experience that sort of unifies it together. And you're generally willing, the feedback we hear is that, well, it can be a kind of boring platform if there's like 750 million of them, right? And so, if it's super sexy, we're willing to consider smaller TAM. The middle one is really, I think, important. We started out thinking it was money, right? And it was all about money. And And I still think it's absolutely about money. We clearly want to have an ecosystem that is self-sustaining and highly profitable for long-tail developers. Without a doubt, that is what we are building. But the other thing we've come to realize is this notion of recognition as being incredibly important. When people think about a platform, it's not just money, right? It's sort of kind of everything. And part of that is recognition. And I'll talk a lot more about that in a slide or two. The last two, on the money and the recognition things, like help me build a brand. That's a really marketing way to describe what you want. But you want sort of, like you want an identity around what you do. You know, you do really cool puzzle games. You do really useful education apps. You do apps that, you know, kids really love, right? And we want to help everyone in this room do that. Right? We want to help people sort of create the notion of identity, so you can create sort of a service-based stickiness between you and your customers. And then the last two are reasons that you don't do things. Right? If deployment is difficult, or there's a lot of friction, and there's a lot of crap in between you and getting to your customers, or going into the store, coming out of the store, then you don't want to do that. That's a pain. If you compare the PlayStation 3 against the Xbox 360, you will talk to any developer who's done. Has anybody done apps to both of those in the room? Okay, so did you find that the 360 was easier than the PS3? That's generally the feedback I get. Yeah. If you look at a platform and you think, actually there was a speaker earlier who was talking about the comparison, they wrote a paper about it between phone development systems, and some of the systems are twice as long to deploy to. I think the paper cites Symbian as being twice as long as iPhone and Android. That you think about that, and then the notion of validation as being boring. Like the last 10% of your software project is 90% of your investment, and by then you've written all the features, and you really don't want to grind through necessarily all the bugs and all of the little issues and stuff like that. So having a community and a process that helps you with that is important. So what don't you want? Right? We heard this incredibly clearly at this session. There was not a single session or conversation I went in where we did not get feedback that I don't want to get lost in a sort of faceless sea of stuff. I don't want my stuff to get lost in that stuff. The guy, Chris Avalon, who did the Obsidian talk, which, by the way, I obviously couldn't go to every talk. I tried to dart into them and listen for 5 minutes, and if it really cool, I could spend like 6 minutes. Chris was amazing. I mean, that was, to me, that like I felt like I got $1,000 worth of sort of consulting in the few minutes I was in there. He was an astoundingly good speaker, and I think that from what I've heard, that's actually pretty consistent across all of the sessions we've had. But one of the things he said was, if you're in indie now, you've already done a game, or you're thinking about doing a game on your own, do not go to the iPhone. It'll disappear in 250,000 devices. And I'm not a game developer. He knows the business vastly better than I do. I'm sort of retweeting what he said verbally, but. That to me, he said, go on the web, right? Start building a community. Use that as a way to establish your own identity and your own brand and your own experience, and don't get lost. So this is what we're hearing you don't want. Like there's a tiny little dot at the tip of that's in this 250,000. You don't want that. What don't we want? 2015, 25 million apps. Right? This is what we don't want. We don't want a giant, faceless, nameless box of content that is undifferentiated, and that the only thing you can see is this tiny little slice of the top stuff. Right? This isn't good for us. We're hearing it's not good for you. So how do you avoid this? We're hearing, let's pretend for a second that the research firm that quoted this number is wrong by a factor of 50%. That's still a really big number on the right. I mean, it's huge. It's massive. So how do we solve this problem? I was at South by Southwest, and I was looking out the window at 10 o'clock in the morning. This is not a picture of that, right? But it is a picture of a phenomenon that happens at South by constantly. I'm looking out the window. It's 10 o'clock in the morning. It's 92 degrees. It's like 80% humidity. And I watch a line spontaneously form, like out of nowhere, of people who are still clearly massively hungover, many of whom are probably still drunk because they haven't gone to bed yet. So they're in line in the sun for like an hour and a half, waiting for this young woman with a clipboard, sitting under an awning, of course, drinking ice water while they're all like, you know, to give them something, right? And I have no idea how they knew to be in that. I mean, it was like, she was like in front of a dumpster. I mean, you know, and so that got me thinking, like, the thing that she's giving out is immensely valuable. Like, it's so valuable you're willing to crawl out of bed or not go to bed to get it at South by Southwest in the blazing sun, and it was concert tickets. And I thought, like, we want those people to be your customers, right? We want to help you find the people who are willing to, metaphorically speaking, stand in the blazing sun for the stuff you're making. So when we think about sort of the math of this economy, how do we do that? Like, what are the things we need to make it so that these groups can sort of spontaneously form in this way? They are not spontaneously forming in an environment in which there's a single place to go, right? It was in front of a dumpster. They are not going to Walmart for these tickets. They are going to a dumpster, literally. So how do we do that? And the other thing I thought about is, it dawned on me suddenly, and this is where the recognition thing really came in. Musicians and software developers are exactly the same now. Like, from their role in the economy is identical. And that means that lots of us are writing code professionally. We're also writing code personally. And coming up with a system that rewards both, like the reason you do one and the reason you do the other, I think is going to be, you know, a key part of what we're doing. So it's not going to, I don't believe, totally want to make it highly profitable and self-sustaining, but I also believe that it needs to, you know, we need to keep an eye on the notion that people do this. You guys do this, we do this for fulfillment, to be part of a community, to give back, to teach others, to, you know, to be a guru, right? To be a mentor amongst, you know, new developers, to be a leader. All of those things are kind of intangible, and just focusing on how do you do a 70-30 revenue split, and that's all you're going to do, and that's all you care about, doesn't actually address that other really core need. If anybody hasn't seen it, Google RSA the RSA talks, the great animated talks. There's one about the carrot and the stick, which talks about why people do work. Very good. I won't blow the punchline. Totally worth watching. Carrot and stick. But it talks about exactly this. So, since, I don't know, I'll pick an arbitrary number, 10,000 years ago, if you wanted to go buy a hat, you went to a store, and you may have even had a choice in hat stores, and you went to the hat store you liked to buy a hat from someone you liked because they had the hats you liked. You did not go to a single store that had every single hat on the planet. We have actually been developing economies since the beginning of time to allow curators to curate. If you want a hammer, you go to a hammer store. You want a hat, you go to a hat store. The existence of sort of the big box phenomenon is almost entirely based on how hard it is to move molecules and the profit around molecules. We don't have to follow those rules. So we can move stuff, you know, we're moving electrons. That means that you can have like a lot of small boutique shops. Blogs can set up stores. These are my favorite 100 apps. Right? And I think that that's absolutely the first step we need to actually not be in the problem of 25 million undifferentiated, unfindable, unsearchable, unreachable apps. I think it's super important. So when we look at the partnerships we just announced, and we think about this, you know, where we want to go with this, Dixon's knows a lot about how to sell stuff to people. That's what they do. And the fact that they are, you know, excited about duking it out with Best Buy, you know, that's awesome, right? And you're probably not going to win in that in digital in the next 5 years because you both offer all the same apps. Like, that doesn't make sense. So what you're going to do is you're going to be the one who's better at it for the customer base you serve, which is perfect for us in this room because we want to be differentiated, right? We don't want to be lost in the noise. And I think the same is true for ASUS. This is something I was talking with Joe about from Konami. You know, he reflects that. Sort of their perspective on it is identical. They're huge, and they can't buy placement in any of the stores either. right? They've got millions of dollars to spend if they want to. They can't buy it. And the work we're doing with Adobe, which we're also super excited about, we think is another great example of sort of partnering in a way that helps leverage the onboarding process into the store. So we think curation and partnership are super important to building an open platform. And this is sort of forms what I'm now referring to as my 3-circle diagram, which is, now you can see why it's three circles. And kind of like the party last night, we had 3 zones. Curators, or the notion of the top, right? Partners, and we want to help customers and partners curate, right? We want to reward that segment so that there is a substantial value they provide. They are not just like 100,000 shoe boxes with 5 things in them, and you reach and then you pull it out, and you like that. There's a value there that we see and that we're excited about, and that we have built in and are building in into AppUp. Giving developers and creators an end-to-end platform that's optimized for that. So a system that lets you, as a developer, work directly with consumers where you want to and build a strong relationship directly with consumers. We want to build that for you. But we also want to really reward if the notion of curation is being part of that process, part of that feedback process, so that curators can tell you, hey, according to our data, this is what we think. This is where you should be thinking about going. Have you thought about adding these 3 features? Have you thought about this geo? Or we've seen this massive spike amongst a segment that's really interesting to you over here, right? We're seeing huge growth in working moms. Right? So we think these 3 circles really work together to form that, and this is what we want to enable, right? This is what we want to build in AppUp. We want to build I almost said continuum, but I'm not going to because it's a circle. So we're the beginning, right? We actually in this room are, I think, on this one. We are quite fortunate in that we're not the world's leader in the app business, right? So we get to decide what we want to do instead of having to inherit sort of legacy. And I think one of the things we're consciously deciding is we want a partner, we want a community, we want an open system. We want to reward people for the value they can provide in the economy that we think really does provide substantial value. Curation, huge value. Creation, massively important. And of course, consumption, if people aren't actually consuming, then what we do is kind of immaterial, whether you're doing it for recognition or for cash or for some combination of both. So we can do better than this, and I'm not, as I said, this is not a treatise on the phone, nor is it a treatise on the value of either of these devices. And the reason I think we can do better than this is we can think about the fact that we want to build great experiences for both devices and for users rather than just for individual devices. We get to start like we are now without legacy, so we can cut the cord, right? We don't have to assume sort of certain fundamental architectural assumptions. And now that we know that we're going to be in a world where there's 25 million apps, we can start now thinking about making sure that we're not building out a bed of nails. OK, so a few things. First of all, I wanted to do can you turn the lights up, please? I want to get just a quick show of hands on feedback. So overall feedback, if you thought that this show was gosh darn good and you'd like to come back next year, raise your hand. So I would like to come back next year. If you only, OK, I'm thinking about it. OK, that's cool. Do you want more technical or more business? So technical, raise your hand, take it, technical, more technical content. Do you want more, what? More apps, labs? OK, hands-on labs, more technical and hands-on labs. Labs. What about more business? OK, so we're about 2/3 and 1/3, nearly half and half. Was it too much of us? I mean, I know when one vendor hosts an event, it's like, oh God, more Intel. Like, so, no? I mean, was it OK? Was it not enough? Right amount? Too much? All right, too much Intel? You can tell me. Right amount of Intel. So somebody has got to tweet that, find out find out his Twitter ID, tweet that. Elements, colon, now with the right amount of exclamation point. See, I got our new tagline for, for 2011. We're set. Thank you very much. This is crowdsourcing at its finest. Evening event, was it good? Did you like it? You gonna do that again? Cool. I loved it. I really didn't know about the bumper cars until like 2 minutes before, and I became giddy. I was giggling. I had to say, bumper cars. And then somebody, is the person here who we did the blindfolded bumper car thing? Yeah, that was awesome. So I got in his bumper car and I put my hands over his eyes and then I was like, go left, no, left! And we're driving around and we should do that next year actually. Right? Like one person blindfolded, maybe a little bit more power. I kind of didn't feel like I didn't feel like I was gonna die. And I think a little bit more of fear of death would have been a better experience for me. And then I could have thought about the fact that if Christos was in a car and Dawn was also in a car, I could kill them both. It's one of those things, inside the head voices, outside the, gotta remember that. All right, so last but not least, you guys are here, you stuck it out. We absolutely appreciate that. We love you for it, so you're gonna get a free admittance next year. So you will be getting, and this is going to be a good experiment, because we can count all of you, and we'll know that if you guys have dark-netted that word, lifer, because that's the code. It's a shared secret now. It is only known by us. So you'll get a survey. Last question of the survey will ask you for a code or some random word like, what's the capital of, I don't know, Pluto? And the answer will be lifer, right? It'll be the last question, or it'll say code at the top. Put lifer in it. You will then get on the list for free admittance to our next event. Last but not least, I want to say thank you very much to our industry speakers. It was a phenomenal event. Was trying to be read tweets while I was asking questions, and it was awesome. As I said at the beginning, having competing events to me was, having two things I wanted to go to at the same time was a great sign. So that was really awesome. And thank you very much to the speakers. And last but not least, if you have a plate, the black plate or white plate that says elements, that means you're staff. So can you guys please stand up? Anybody who is staff, stand up. There's other staff. Everybody? And in the back? Thank you very much. And I think there's booze outside, and we'll see you next year. Thank you.